Very good day. I'm Rita from National Defence University of Malaysia. Here are my team members, Dr. Lin Shumpet from Inti International University, Dr. Fairuz from National Defence University of Malaysia, and Ms. Fatin from University Selangor. Alright, I'm sure that everyone know what is gamifications. So today I'm going to share you a topic on unlocking language learning potential through gamification in 21st century classroom of learning. First of all, I'm sure that all of us we are familiar already with gamification, but to what extent are we using gamification or we are enhancing and integrating gamifications of learning inside the classroom of environment learning? First, what is the gamifications defined in this particular research on? Right, so we are emphasizing into gamifications integrates game elements into the non-games context. Right, so what is the purpose of conducting this research itself is to create, we like to enhance and create an interactive and engaging environment for learners in classroom environment of learning, and at the same time looking into encouraging practicing into critical thinking, problem solutions, as well as collaborations in between, right, integrations in classroom of learning. Right, the current problems in the classroom learning of environment itself appear, okay, due to the most of the teachers is still emphasizing a lot on traditional teaching classroom methods and lack of engagements, although there is a revamp of syllabus based on Malaysia's education system. However, due to the constraint of examinations is still being emphasizing, right? Therefore, teaching to cover and completing the syllabus is still emphasized to fulfill the needs of exam-oriented. So second reason itself would be students are struggling with the motivation and focus due to a big classroom of learning. Teachers are focusing to cover the syllabus of the technique of answering is needed to score in examination. So there's a lack of environment in motivating the students into participating in learning. And thirdly, is due to the limited opportunity for them to practice the real-life language. As we know that in classroom of environments, in certain schools, they are using the first language emphasis. For example, SJKC, the measure of communications instructions in classroom learning will be Mandarin. Therefore, they have a very limited situations for practices of English in the class real situations. And same go to SK and SJKT. So the focus of the language itself in English is a limitation. Students are learning and participating, right? Mastering the English is due to the exam needs of language. Right, the significance of the studies is emphasizing into sparkling the curiosities and to build the intrinsic motivations among the students itself in loving and learning English itself. At the same time, we like to promote an active learning environment for the students for the practices so that they will be more accessible for the language practice in fun attitudes learning situation as well. Based on the literatures, right, into the sessions of learning itself, gamifications, it does improve the engagements and learning outcomes definitely, right? To enhance the immediate result of change is not the main focus of in-game gamifications requirements of learning. So game elements is incorporated in the educational games to build, right, to enhance the intrinsic motivations of the learners due to the certain goal they would like to improve their academic performance through different style of learning and mastering the language itself according to Tarashu's 2022. Well, based on the 21st century of learning itself, different skill is required into the knowledge of learning. As we know that IT technology is integrated, ICT is integrated in most of the situation of learning itself, so that students will be able to expose for different kind of languages, different kind of informations and inputs of learning in more interactive way, where they can enhance the students to use it in classroom of learning as well. So according to Lin and LV in 2017, one of the constraints that face in technology integrations of learning nowadays is due to family incomes, where it would differentiate the family who is affordable for the exposure of internet usage and gadgets and enhancing of language learning will improve, students can improve better compared to family who is unaffordable to produce this kind of necessity for the students, the children in house learning as well. So this research is being conducted right through an experimental research by using the language schemes of integrations and involve the single group selected students. So the students that involved in these language schemes are mostly from year 5 students that involve 108 students from the few schools selected in Kuala Selangor. So after the language schemes conducted, there is a question A distributed for the survey, alright, that focusing on 30 items and divided into 3 sections where it would be looking into students' behavioral, cognitive, and emotional aspects of language learning attitudes to it. And the result was being analyzed based on a statistical result by using the standard deviations and mean. Right. So based on the findings, okay, here are the questions, right, of the items that are being used into it. The first table will be looking into behavioral aspect of the language attitudes towards the learning. So based on the questions, there are 10 questions in under these sections of behaviorism. So looking into the result of the shift before the language camp and after the language camps, they can see there are movements and changes of our students' attitudes towards the learning itself. So for example, question 6 and question 7 itself, before and after the camp, we can see that there is a drop, alright, of the result. Okay, so where students moving, looking into a positive angles in towards the acceptance of the learning itself. Then while questions 8 and 9 include negative sections into it. When I miss my class, I never ask my students or teachers for the homework what have been taught. I do not feel enthusiastic, right, to come to the class when English is taught, and I do not pay attention when English teachers is explaining in the lessons. Before the camp itself, students have very negative, right, perceptions towards the English itself. But after the camp, you can see there is a shift, right, okay, into the school itself, and students have started to look into a positive change of attitudes. So it does improve through the language camp itself. It does improve students' confidence into the sections of learning towards English. Right. The second table is focusing into the cognitive aspects, where looking into students' learning attitudes on their mental. Right. So there are 10 items being distributed as well in these sections. Alright. So students have a shift and they admit and started to recognize the importance of English, and they feel self-motivated towards the learning itself and acceptance of the needs and the change of English after the language comes. And third table will be focusing into emotional aspects of language attitudes learning itself. Right, there are 10 items here looking into the students' emotionally excitement or rejections before and after the language camp. So before the language camp, students have a very negative, right, feelings towards English. However, after the language camps, the responses, the attitudes towards the rejections of English started to reduce, and they started to increase certain part of enjoyment and confidence into the English language learning. So, through a simple language camps being conducted and integrated during the sections of learning English itself, students started to accept and to pay attention into the importance and the needs of English. So based on the result that collected, and then we can see that integrations of the gamifications in language learning itself, right, within the education setting has influenced the students' attitudes and proficiency of the students, right, the learners itself in the language learning. So if the teachers can enhance, right, or integrate at least a simple English game itself, right, inside each of the classroom of learning, I'm definitely sure that students will have a very positive attitude towards this English learning, and they can see the needs and importance of the English learning itself. So the interventions of the language games incorporate different games elements, right? So we've designed the games based on different games elements that looking into the students' behavior, cognitive, and emotional aspect. It does help the students to shape and to change the mentalities, their attitudes, and acceptance of English after the game, right? So as a conclusions, gamification enhance attitudes change, right? Indirectly increase the intrinsic motivations of the learner itself, and it does help the students to improve the proficiency of language in the long term of aspect. So as a recommendation in classroom of teaching as a teachers, right, I would encourage the teachers to incorporate different gamifications elements into the classroom of learning by incorporating role playing as well and certain activities, simple activities, for example, bingo integrated into the language. And it is not necessary bingo to be played by using the vocabulary. It can be a situational created for speaking situation or practices too. So design inclusive games to diverse the classroom of learning itself, right, will help the students to create, to accumulate, or to integrate it to fulfill the different type of learners, right, through different games by having the difficulties of level during the sections of learning itself. So quest of the needs is one of the level, one of the game elements will be integrated during the sessions of language game itself, where we design the questions according to different difficulties to fulfill, to fit in different learners' proficiency as well. Right, that's all from me. Thank you.